Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces and be back here again. Thanks for inviting me back. My name is Phil Sikes. I'm a member of the Kansas City Woodturners. I live over in Overland Park, and I'll be at the AAW Symposium doing some demos this year too. So if anyone's going to AAW, please come to my room because I'll need people in my room to watch my demo. But I'm not going to do this demo there. Tonight we're going to do a demo talking about Endgrain and how to cut Endgrain, because Endgrain is tough. So I'll take this out first. So first, for anyone who doesn't know what Endgrain is, when we're talking about Endgrain, what we mean about Endgrain is the cutting into this portion of your tree. If your tree's growing straight up and down, and I will try to keep it in the video here. Your wood fibers are going vertical up and down the tree, kind of like straws. And if you grab a bunch of straws, you go to McDonald's or wherever, and you grab a bunch of straws right there, you can grab them in the middle and just squeeze them real easily, and they kind of squish really nice. But if you were to try to grab a group of straws from two ends and push them together, they don't really compress that well, do they? It's the same thing with our wood fibers here. So if we think of this piece of wood as a section of straws right here, we can cut into side grain very easily with our tools. But cutting into the end grain, the top of the straws or the bottom of the straws, is very difficult with the tools that we have. So we have some different tools we can use to actually do that, some tools that are actually meant to cut into end grain. So first I'm going to start with kind of how you could do it with a gouge, and then we're going to move into a ring tool. Has anyone ever heard of a ring tool before? No. Yeah? No? Well, I'm going to show them, but I'll show you this one real quick. So this is a ring tool, and it literally is a ring, and it has two bevels on it. You can see there is a inner bevel on this side right here. This is a flat on the outside, and then it has a bevel on the inside there. And then on the other side, it has a bevel on the outside. Right here. There we go. And it has a flat on the inside right there. And if you compare that to a regular gouge, or regular bowl gouge, so here's a regular bowl gouge. It has a bevel on the outside. Let's see if I can get it lined up here. The bevel shape, should have practiced this at home. There we go. Is the same. You can't see it in the video here very well. There we go. Anyway, this angle right here and this angle right here are the same, except it's backwards. So while this tool is going to cut this way, this tool is going to cut this way. And we'll find out why that's important here soon. But essentially, your ring tool is a backwards gouge. Now, hook tool, and there are two kinds of hook tools I brought tonight. A straight hook tool is this guy right here. And it is very similar to a ring tool, except it's a hook. And so it's only a partial ring tool. And it only has one outside bevel and one inside bevel there. It doesn't have the two angles or the two bevels that our ring tool has. And then my favorite tool is this guy right here. This is a cranked hook tool. And you can see there's a big bend in it right there. The hook is actually on the end right here. There it is. And then, so there's the hook. And then this angle right here keeps this side edge in alignment when we cut, so that we can actually cut on this side piece right here. So that probably doesn't make sense, or maybe it does. If it does, great. If not, we're going to show how it works, and hopefully you'll see how it works and why it works, so that you can effectively cut end grain. Alrighty? So the first thing we got to talk about when we're cutting end grain is how we're going to mount our piece of material. So this is literally just a chunk of log that I cut in half. The sides aren't even square. We can square that up. That's not a big deal. But our fibers, again, are running side to side like this. So what other kind of turning do we generally do where the fibers are running parallel to the bed of the lathe? Anyone?
Spindle.
Spindle turning. So this is a giant spindle turning right here. Okay, not our general size that we would usually do, but maybe depending on what you're doing, you might use something like this. Since I'm using an entire section of log, I want to look at where my pith is on my log right here. And depending on the type of turning that I'm going to do, this is kind of more just for demonstration and practice and fun. So there are some cracks in here. I'm not too worried about that right there. But if I was worried about the end result, I would either still want to cut out the pith and only use maybe a section, like right here, for my end grain turning. If I have a big log, that's not a big deal. But you can just cut a branch, and you can do the same type of turning we're going to do tonight. And what's great about that is you can use a small diameter branch, a 3-inch diameter branch. You can make little flowers, little podlets, little things. You can very easily sell at shows and things like that, or take into your wife or significant other, or things like that that are kind of really easy to do with just small branches instead of needing a big, huge log. So that's one of the advantages of using Endgrain or learning how to work with Endgrain, is that it opens up the possibilities depending on the kind of material you have available and what you can use it for. So, what I'm actually going to do is mount it so that the pith is not in the center. And the reason why I do that is because depending on the type of shape I might be doing, let's get that back in there. If I'm going to do a little podlet or a little flower or even a stem to goblet, I want that pith to be off center so that it doesn't run through the stem of my goblet or the stem of my flower, because you don't want a hole running through that. You want to offset that so that it's off to the side and you have a nice solid piece of material through there. So end grain turning, or this type of turning, can be used for bowls. It can be used for cups. It's really great for boxes. Does anybody make boxes? Yeah? How many of you use a scraper to do the inside of a box? How many of you enjoy scraping wood? Okay. I don't enjoy scraping wood, and that's why I kind of got into this, to find out how could I do this without having to scrape wood. Scraping is a perfectly fine way to do the inside of a box or to cut end grain. We're just not going to do it here tonight. Okay. I got a lot of bark here to take off, and since this is just a giant spindle, I'm going to use a spindle gouge, a nice heavy diameter spindle gouge, to remove it. Now, if you wanted to do a nice goblet or something like that, or a flower that uses the exterior bark, you can do that too. I'm going to remove it for practice period, or for practice here. But you can, leave a section of the bark there to get a nice edge to the top of your piece when you're done too. If you have questions, please feel free. I don't have a set plan for what we're doing here besides kind of going through everything. So if you have questions, please let me know. And I just have between centers, we're going to put a tenon on it and then put it in the chuck. So, giant spindle. Since it's a spindle, I always need to be cutting down, right? I don't want to go up, I want to cut down. So what I like to do with something like this is I just want to get it down to solid material as quick as I can. Okay, so nothing really new there. I just want to get it down to a rough shape. Now we're going to put a tenon on it, because that is not flat at all. So for that, I'm going to use a bowl gouge.
Is that pretty green?
It's pretty green. It fell off an arborist truck this week, so I don't know when it was cut. But it's pretty green. It's not too wet, though. I'm not going to get anybody too wet.
Do you know what kind of wood it is?
Free wood,
Best. That's the best
the
kind.
best kind. I'm pretty sure it's oak though. That's what it looks like to me, and that's kind of how it's been acting like. And also the wood chips that came with it looked really like oak. So that's what I'm going to go with. It might not be though. It is a little punky. So there we go. Now, one thing with when you've got really uneven ends, some people will want to just nibble. And your tool just kind of bounces all over. This is the one time where it is kind of nice to take a larger tool, to take a healthy cut, and let it ride on in. But you got to make sure you've got your bevel pointed at the center. So this is about a 55-degree bevel. I want that pointed right at my center. I don't want it pointed in a weird direction. It also helps to have a lathe that has a little bit of power to do that, so this is a great lathe for that. And all I want to do is get a nice flat right here, and then I'm going to fit my jaws on there, so let's make that. And I remembered what I forgot tonight. I always forget something. I didn't bring my saw. So that's okay. We just won't saw anything tonight.
Your what? Saw?
Saw, just cut off a little nub. We'll be all right. So when I make a tenon for this chuck, I like to have a flat right here that's going to sit right on top of my jaws. And I don't really want it to overhang the jaw. I want it to be sitting on that little ledge that these jaws make. Now this has a pretty small or a pretty narrow top face. I generally use dovetail jaws, and they generally have a little bit of a wider face. But when I'm working with wet or with green wood in this orientation, I find that these jaws, these are one-way jaws, these are the profile jaws, and they have little serrations in there, grip really well. And so they require a different kind of tenon than a dovetail tenon. How many of you have a one-way with the profile jaws? If you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
I've got the chuck.
You got the chuck? Do the jaws look kind of like that? Mm-hmm. So these jaws right here, instead of being just perfectly round, they actually have these little curves on either side of each of the jaw there. And what that allows you to do is to have about 60% contact on a large range with these jaws all the time. Whereas with a dovetail jaw, you'll have 100% contact for a very narrow size of tenon. So this gives you a little bit of leeway that you can play with right here. When you're playing with wet wood, sometimes it's advantageous to have a little bit of a larger tenon on there, so you have a little bit more material to grip. And so these jaws, while may not have as good a holding power as a dovetail jaw of the same size, they allow you to get a wider range of sizes. So if you're doing production where you're doing 10, 15, 20 bowls, cups, whatever you're working on right there, you might be really good at getting about the right size, but it's going to vary just a little bit. And you don't want to be taking out calipers and measuring your tenon every single time you're making a tenon. You just want to have something that will get it generally there. So that's the advantage of these. For most new turners, I recommend not getting these, because most new turners don't understand how to use the jaws, and therefore they'll make a dovetail for it, and then it won't grip, and the piece will go flying off, and it'll break off because they don't have the right kind of tenon. So whatever kind of jaw you have, whether it's a profile jaw from one way, or if it's a dovetail jaw from most other people, Record Power and Axminster, they have a lot of serrated jaws like this too. Make sure you're using the right kind of tenon to grab onto your piece. I'm just going to get rid of this little bit of waste right here so it can fit in the chuck okay, and then we'll flip it around. Notice too, I'm only going directly towards the center or going down. I'm not trying to go up in any way like you would on a bowl, where you might start here from the bottom and go up. That's going to push this end grain out, cause it to splinter and pull apart, and cause your tool to go in random directions that you don't want it to do. So don't do that. We always want to go downhill. And even when we're working on a side grain bowl, we're still technically going downhill when we're starting at the bottom and going to the top, because we've rotated our fibers this way and we're going downhill this way, okay? But for right now, when we're thinking about end grain, we're thinking about spindle orientation, down is always towards the center of your piece. You ready to catch, Mike?
It'll cut it.
Got it? All right, here we go. We won't do that. I'm going to pass this around. I went looking for end grain pieces that I have in my house. Turns out I don't have any in my house. Then this was a practice piece that I had done months ago. One of the reasons why I got into doing this is so that you could make something really thin and make lampshades out of it, and this is not going to work. But I'll pass this around. You can just feel how kind of thin it is. And this was never meant to be finished. It's a natural finish. There's nothing on it. I probably hit it with a little sandpaper, but not much. So you can see the kind of finish that's going to come off these tools. Don't touch the very bottom. Just don't worry about the bottom. Oh, that could work. Yeah. But you can see how thin you can get end grain pieces. And in my experience, I've been able to get end grain thinner than I can a side grain piece. It's just bumpy on the bottom. I hadn't really figured out how to use the tools yet.
He's a rebel.
And Ron, you said you want to be home by 11 or 12?
12's okay.
Okay, 12.
I'll be asleep by 10.
Okay, good.
Either one.
Yeah, you do.
So if we look at this tenon right here, we actually see this little step. And that's that little flat that's actually going to sit on top of my jaws right here. And that's what's going to help keep it stable. If you have just a large flat right here that's going to sit against your jaw face, but it's not perfectly flat, when you tighten your jaws, it actually pulls this top face away from your surface here. And that's why you get wobble, or can get wobble, from your pieces, because this bottom section right here is actually not contacting your chuck. And that's where a lot of the strength comes from when you're chucking material. So I just want to check and make sure the top of my jaws is contacting all the way around. There we go. I want this for one more bit. Since we're just so out of round right here, I just want my tailstock support when I go to take it off. And because it's a little off balance there, I'm only at about 750 RPM. You don't really need to go too fast. I just prefer my blade not to bounce. Now, if you're someone who does bowls a lot, you're going to be tempted to just take your tool, turn it backwards, and try to pull in towards the middle and get rid of that nub, and it will not work very well. So don't do that. Okay, now we're done with the testing. There we go. All right, now we've got a flat surface here, just about. And now we can kind of get to how we're going to hollow this out. Now, I mentioned earlier that our hollowing tools here are really the opposite of a standard gouge. So if a standard gouge cuts this way, tools we're going to use here are going to cut this way. Okay? So first we'll just start with the clean. Well, before we get to those, you can hollow with a gouge, and there's a couple different techniques. Back hollowing. Has anyone ever heard of back hollowing? Or using the uppercut, an uppercut? No? Okay. So back hollowing or an uppercut is where you take your gouge. This is a spindle gouge in this case. You kind of start the cut way over here, and then you're going to come into the middle and then go up. Like that. And I'm not very good at it. I don't practice it that often, so don't take my word for it. There are better ways to do it, I think. So you can take your gouge, get it into the middle there, and then you pull up or push down. And the idea is that you're keeping bevel contact with the bevel as you're going up towards 12 o'clock, between 12 and 1, and then you rotate the tool towards 1 o'clock. We're zipping through this because this is the boring part, but it makes a hole, which is great. But it's not a very clean hole. If you practice it a lot, you can get really good at it. I don't practice it enough. I'm not very good at it. But you can make a hole that way. The other way you can do it is you can just use a scraping motion. So I'm not in contact with my bevel. I'm just pulling my bottom edge and using it as a scraper. And I can get a pretty good shape with that. And I can show that again there. I'll actually use the spindle gouge. I can get a pretty good controllable shape like that. And I don't have a longer handle. But it's a scraped cut, so the surface there is just not as clean as it could be. You can come back in with another negative rake scraper or something, kind of clean it up. But there's other options. So let's look at those options. The first one we're going to look at is this guy right here. So this is a ring tool. I brought two of them. This is my small one. This one's made by Sorby. You can get them pretty cheap here in the States. And until I got this one came all the way from Sweden. It's a little bit larger. This one is probably the best one out there, and there's very few ring tool makers out there. Sorby is probably the second best because it has basically the same design. There are other companies that make these that have a different design, and they are not as effective. From what I hear, I've never used them. I like this to start with because it's smaller, which means it's more aggressive, but it can also get into a smaller hole. So that's what we're going to start with. What kind of price do they cost? I think this was probably around $50 or so. And I just buy the tool and I use my handle here. This one I had to have sent from Sweden, and it was like $115 all in.
Who makes it?
Hans Carlson. Karlsson. They do handmade gouges and lutherie tools and other tools for very specific markets. And there is a woodturner named Ulf Jansson, who's Swedish, and he uses a ring tool. That's all he uses. And so this is the tool kind of that he designed and that Carlson has made for him. And it is a high quality, fantastic tool. They now make two, the larger one and a smaller one. I don't have the smaller one. But if you're going to buy one, I'd say start with the Sorby to see if you like it. And then if you kind of enjoy it, you could move into the Carlson tool. I really like using these. I think they're fun. They're not as universal or as diverse as some other tools out there, but for what they do it really well. So let's look at what it can do. So there's a couple different ways. Most people will have the tool handle down, and they're going to use this kind of bottom section of the tool right here. We'll see when we get going. I tend to have mine flatter or even sometimes down because I started learning using some of these other tools first, and they all have a negative angle on their tool. So let's start with this though. So it is a bevel rubbing tool. It's a bevel rubbing tool, so you actually want to rub the bevel first and turn your speed down to probably somewhere between 500 and 700 RPM. You don't need to go fast with these to get them to work properly. It's more of a technique, and you need to find that bevel first. And they can work very quickly too, which is fun. Now the first thing you're going to notice is that I'm actually pushing the tool handle away from me. I don't know if you can see that. So that I can get the tool to come this direction towards me, and then I also have to pull it this way. So with a gouge, when we're doing side grain work, we're usually going towards the headstock and towards the middle. Because this is backwards, we have to come away from the headstock and towards us in one motion. And then the rotational axis is the third thing. And that's going to help keep the portion that you're cutting with, which is this corner over here, in contact with the wood. If you don't rotate and you don't push, you're going to get a catch and it's going to scare you.
It's a situation moment.
So we're going to find our bevel, get our cutting edge, and push our handle out that way as we're coming around. And if you remember, I said that this actually has two bevels on it. It has an outer bevel and then an angle bevel right here. There we go. There's this outer ring and then this inner ring right here. So the inner ring is more used to get the bottom. And I know I just told you to come towards you and come out, but we're actually going to go in and towards the center here to get that middle taken care of. So I just made a little kind of divot right there so I can use the outer ring right here if I want to. Get this in. But I tend to like to use the inner ring. Especially, I like to work off the end. If I'm working off the end, I have a little more variety in what I can do, but since I'm on this side, it's nicer to have the tool handle over here than being way over here. So what I love about the ring tool is that when you kind of get that motion going, you get a really nice curve on the inside and you get a really clean surface. And that's what I love about it. It's not a scraping cut. I don't have a ton of torn grain in here. I have a nice clean cut that I could just touch with some sandpaper and I could be done if I wanted to. Let's go to the bigger ring real quick and then we'll go to the hooks. Anybody have any questions? Yeah?
How often does it have to be sharpened?
Great question. As often as you want to. Let me use this one real quick and then I'll show you how to sharpen it. Just like with any other gouger tool, you're going to kind of feel when it needs to be sharpened. With these tools, because they use kind of a slower RPM, we're not as aggressive with them as we might be with a gouge. And they also, I sharpen them up to at least about 1,000 grit or up to 3,000 grit, depending on my stones. And so you just need to hone. Usually you just need to kind of hone as you're working. You might only have to sharpen, at the end of the day when you're all done for the next session. But otherwise, I just touch it up kind of to hone it, and that tends to work really well. So this is the bigger ring tool. The advantage of the bigger ring tool is it actually gets a cleaner cut when you've made a larger kind of opening there to work with. It's actually less aggressive because the angle that's contacting the wood is not as, it doesn't change as much as on the smaller tool. But they work the same way. Find that bevel. I'm a little close with my tool rest here. So the main thing to remember with these tools is your motion, your physical motion is going to be different, kind of the opposite of what you're doing with a gouge. And you just want to get those nice bevel rubbing cuts. If you let it get away from you, then it's going to pull and then cause a catch. So don't do that. The catches with these can be pretty spectacular sometimes. And usually the reason why you get a catch is because you're not pushing that handle far enough or fast enough away from you, and it starts to pull in and dig into the wood right there. So it's not a tool for the faint of heart. You really need to move when you're doing it. All right. We might come back to this, but let's go to our first ring tool. Sorry, hook tool, which is the straight hook tool, which is essentially, where are we at here? The same thing as a ring, except it's an open ring. But we're going to use this section of the tool right here, which is really the bottom to the end right here. And we're going to, this is really great for making, have any box makers here? Who makes boxes? These are great for having a nice flat bottom. And then getting a nice square side. I'll show you how that works. It's a little guy. This one comes from Germany. So there aren't a lot of US manufacturers of these tools, I found, because nobody really uses them. We've got all these carbide tools that people like to use, which are great. They've kind of taken the place of these other tools. So this comes from Germany. It's a company called Wiedemann, or Wiedemann, Hans and Marco. And they cut these out of a block of M2 steel, and then they cryogenically treat them. So it's really nice steel. And that's why you really only need to hone them. Let me talk about sharpening the ring real quick. So for honing, this is a knife strop, and I literally I'll put the bevel right on there and just draw it across a few times. And then I'll turn it over. You want to go all the way around the rings. And then this is a serrated knife sharpener. It's 1200 grit. And so for the inside bevel, I'll use that and I'll go around. Let's see if I can get it on camera there. Just like that. And then I'll draw the ring right across here to take off the burr that gets formed from using this guy.
Isn't burr what does the cutting?
The burr does not do the cutting, so you want to remove the burr. You want to sharpen the actual edge right there. So this is just a hand stone. This is 1000 grit and 600 grit on one side. 1000 on one side, 600 on the other. And so for this ring right here, it just takes a little practice to feel where that bevel is and just go all the way around. And then I use a slightly larger honing stick to get the inside there and remove that burr. And if I'm at home, I've got my regular sharpening stones, and I've got a 3000 grit stone. I've got 1000 grit, 3000, and I will actually, they're bench stones, so they're sitting on the bench, and I will draw them across that to get a really nice sharp edge. And the 1000 grit's fine, but when you get to 3000, it gets a nice mirror finish on it. It's razor sharp. You'll just sit there. You can just take care of all the little hairs on your hand, whatever you want to. Shave your face with it, and it works really well. The steel on this is really nice. It's a bearing steel, so it's a very hard, really nice steel. And the same thing with the hooks. There we go. I use the. It's backwards for me. It's weird. I use this guy on the inside edge, and then I'll use this guy on the outside edge, and then I'll hone it to get that burr off it. If you have questions about sharpening, I can probably show you a little bit later. A little easier, but that's the basic idea. So with this tool, because it only has one bevel on it right here and it's flat and it is square to our workpiece right here, it's great for making a flat bottom. Now, for this tool, we do need to have our handle raised up. So I'm going to raise up my tool rest here above the center line, and then I'm going to angle my tool down, and then I'm going to rotate to about 30 degrees. So it's kind of hard to see there, but I'm 30 degrees, and I want to cut as much as I can with the tip or just below the tip. That's the safe spot to cut with. And so for this, I'm just going to pull it towards me. There's the bevel. Get a nice streamer shooting off there. It's a little high for me. Now you can turn it backwards to get that center eaten out a little bit. You got to do that every once in a while, otherwise the center kind of domes in the middle there. And you got to find a way to clear that out. So this is great for making a nice flat bottom. And it'll go nice and deep too. This is, I think, like a 1/2 inch bar. I've got a larger bar, so I can go pretty deep with it. You cannot cleanly get the sides, so you actually have to scrape right there. And for that, you use the bottom of the hook down here to do the scraping portion of it. And as long as you use a nice kind of gentle kind of cut with that, it does get a pretty nice surface. But again, we're scraping here, and I said earlier I don't like to scrape. So that's why we have the cranked hook tool. There we go, ta-da! Because here's the hook on the top there, and then this crank, this side right here, this whole thing is a hole cutter. All right? So let me switch it up here. You can see how it works. Sometimes it's referred to as a politician. In green wood turning, it's referred to as a politician. I don't know why that is. Maybe because it goes both ways. It's crooked. It is. Yeah, it is crooked. This is my one joke for the night. The politician here. This is used in green wood turning for doing exactly what we're going to do here, which is to cleanly cut the sides. So, because I've got this really funky hook on it right here, I need to be careful how I use it. Usually you'll want to drill a hole or have a hole already in there. We kind of have a hole here, so we're going to start with that. Now this is a bevel rubbing tool. I do not want the bevel to leave the wood, or I chance breaking the tool and getting a catch, or getting a catch then breaking the tool. So I can bring it across like this. It's kind of an uncomfortable angle, or I can start here. I'm rubbing the bevel here, and as I bring it over, we start to cut. And rotating the tool is what controls my depth of cut. If I roll it towards me, I'm really opening up my cutter, and it's going to want to grab and dig and take a big cut. If I'm rolling it away from me, I'm engaging the bevel more, and it's going to push the cutter out and stop the cut. Now I need some kind of hole here to kind of get in there with this tool. So there's actually another cranked hook tool. And then this one is from Andre Martel. Has anyone heard of Andre Martel? He's Canadian, French Canadian. Chip, you've heard of him? You ever seen him demo? He's make one of his big lampshades. This is his little cutter. The big cutter is about this big, and he'll make like a 20-inch lampshade, like 20 inches deep, using these cutters here. So this is a very flexible cutter. And what I like about it, which is different than the other crank one I have here, is it actually has an extra bevel, or an extra cutting section on it, on the back of the hook. So this hook actually has a cutting bevel on this side and on this side right here. And it allows me to make a hole in the middle very gently. And then, now I've got more room to start my cut with this tool. And I can come back in here when I need to make another starting area there. Notice how I'm really far over the tool rest? It's one of the reasons why you want to go with a lower revolution on your machine here. You don't need a ton of power. It's more of a finesse in getting that cutter in the right spot to make that cut that you want to do. So as I rotate the tool, I'm on the back of the bevel right there, and my cutter is away from the surface. And as I rotate it towards me, it engages. And I can get that little bit there at the end that I want to. All right, Mel, take a look. See if you see any tear. Now it's oak, so there is a lot of...
Smooth as a baby's bottom.
Yeah, isn't that nice? So if you can practice the arc and practice the movement, you can get a nice curve that you want right there. If you're doing like just kind of a bowl shape like this, or if you're doing more of a goblet shape where you're going deeper and coming out, you'll just do a lot less sanding by cutting as opposed to scraping. Questions so far? This is the little cutter. Let's go with it for a little bit longer here. It is really weird to have to like pull to get it to work properly. It was not very intuitive when I first tried doing it, and it's taken a little while to get the hang of it.
Which one of those do you like the best? The rings or the hooks or?
I really like the ring. Like I said, it's kind of more of a one-hit wonder. You just get a nice kind of shape to it. The cranked hook tool is definitely more versatile, and you can do more shapes with it. You can, I didn't really do it here, but you can instead of just making a curve, you can do outward curves as well with it just by rotating the tool as you're working with it. So this is much more versatile, but it takes a lot longer to learn and to figure out how to control. But I tend to like just making bowls, so I really like the this guy right here. Let me take a little bit of this side down. I'm gonna go back to the ring real quick here, and because you're probably wondering too, at least I would be wondering, what do you do with the outside? What do you do with the shape? So we'll look at that in just a second. I want to get a nice smooth curve in here though first. Because we're pulling towards us and out, you want to have more mass on the outside of your piece than you might for a bowl or for a cross grain bowl. All right, that's a little bit of a better curve. So the reason why you want to leave more mass on the outside, and you don't need to leave this much mass, is so that as you're pulling out and away, your piece isn't deflecting as much as it would if you had already like shaped the outside. So now that we're done on the inside, we're not really done, but we're close to done on time, so I want to get you guys out of here. To do the outside, again, we want to treat it like a spindle. So I'm going to remove some material here. And I'm being a little aggressive here. But now is where I really can start to do my final outside shape. So you want to get a nice inside shape first and kind of master or learn how to make a nice inside shape, because then you'd actually do the outside after you do the inside. And really all you want to do then is then just follow the curve that you've made on the inside already. But I can't just keep going into Endgrain. I need to remove this material as I'm going. So I'm going kind of step by step down to clear that out. All right, we're getting there a little bit. Hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of how you would get this off. I'd probably go a lot deeper first, so I'm not wasting all this material away. But that's generally kind of some of the ideas behind using a ring tool and a hook tool on Endgrain. They are really fantastic for making nice clean cuts. You're welcome to come up here and kind of just feel the material right here. Not a lot of torn grain. I'm not seeing any torn grain. It is kind of a rough piece of wood because it is oak and it's wet. But I really like being able to use these for making flowers, making boxes and things. The other one, this is a really good one for the boxes because you can get a nice flat bottom and then just kind of pull those sides out to get it nice and clean. They're just a different way to work with Endgrain than scrapers and other tools that are available to you. And they can be a lot of fun. Like I really like just using the ring tools more just because it's an enjoyable way to turn. You're turning slower. I like to turn multiples, so I'll turn 5 or 10 bowls at a time. And they might not be the most interesting bowls, but they're pretty consistent when I'm done, kind of thing. Yeah. All right, any final questions? Yeah.
What's the tariff on that German tool?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Going up.
You know what? It's actually not the tariff, it's the shipping that really gets you. When I buy them, I usually, or when I bought them, I've waited until a few people I know wanted tools because the shipping directly from them is $50 or 50 euros. You can also go on to the German Amazon store if you have a Prime account and get them shipped to you, and the shipping is a lot better. But I found the best pricing is through them with no VAT included, and they're really good to work with. So that's how I've done it. Yeah, it takes a few weeks to arrive, usually 2 or 3 weeks, but they're fun.
Plus some items directly sold to individuals and not tariff.
Correct. Right. I don't know right now, but it used to be that any amount under $800. So if you bought $200 or $300 in tools,
500 now.
500 now. Yeah. And they won't on their website. They have VAT included. They take that out too. Yeah.
Can you use these on a side grain bowl at all?
Good question. The hooks and like these, no. You should not do it. You shouldn't do it. Not saying you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. For the ring tools, again, you should not do it, but if you understand the principles of cutting with a ring tool and with a gouge, you can actually do the same thing that you would with a gouge. Because this outer ring is basically a gouge, and you can do it. It's not the best way to do it. I think a gouge is the best way to do it, but you can do it. Ulf Janssen, you can find him on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, he's got tons of videos on using the ring tool, and he's very informative on what you can do with it. And he does a lot of things that everyone says you shouldn't do, but he knows how to do them, and he does them safely.
You need to do a $5 Phil's fines.
You think so? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill. Really good demo.